Pistoliers again. Nope, just kidding. Actually, I wanted to talk about another Empire Cavalry, one that you haven't seen much me playing recently, although I have had a few replays in, the past couple months, featuring Demigryph Knights with Halberd, specifically the Royal Altdorfgryphites. I wanted to talk about Monstrous Cavalry today, lower model count cavalry, and why I don't use demis very much, even though they can still be very good in the right situation. Here, I'm up against my patron Red Wedding Planner. I will say from the outset, this is a patron practice session game, so you shouldn't read into the builds too much. We're definitely experimenting and just trying different things out here. And yeah, the Cairn race, I would say from the outset, are risky against the Empire because Volkmar exists. And we've also got a Bright Wizard here, the Demis led by a Warrior Priest. This is not only to give them buffs of, melee attack and damage resistance, but fire damage, obviously, as well. Going to be getting some good synergy with Kindle Flame. And there's a specific synergy here with Cascading Fire Cloak being the cheapest way to proc Kindle Flame, also giving extra melee defense and armor-piercing damage, both of which are super helpful for an expensive unit like the Royal Altdorfgryphites, especially if you don't have healing. Couple Pistoliers up front, yeah, Flagellant, Sigmar Sons. It's lots of spears and halberds, as it is vampire counts. Red Wedding Planner here brought two Black Knights with Lances and Barding. Personally, probably the most underrated cavalry unit in the entire game, in my opinion. I mean, these guys, you don't see them much, but they are literally Undead Reichsguard for 100 cheaper. Like, they have exactly the same weapon strength and charge, a little bit less armor, less melee attack and defense, but ultimately it's the charge bonus and weapon strength that ends up mattering a lot for shock cavalry. But anyway, as the lines kind of get engaged here, Boris is going to run rampant. We'll get some scab scrats going, and the demis are just going to hang around and wait for these Black Knights to make a move. And now, as that happens, we'll talk about Monstrous Cavalry in general. So, Monstrous Cavalry in general, I would say, suffers from a low model count problem. A lot of the interactions that are already not great for heavy cavalry, charging into chaff infantry sort of gets magnified even more when you don't have very many models, and especially given that Demigryph Knight models are relatively small. We kind of look overhead here, they're not really much bigger than your typical cavalry size model, right? Like, we look in comparison to these Black Knights here as they chase them, they're really not that much bigger, whereas something like a Necropolis Knight or a Stag Knight, because they're bigger and they take up a lot more space, it's much harder for them to get surrounded, right? And these other Black Knights, Wolves, sweeping the flank here, doing their best to kind of envelop my defensive box here. Cernsman took a big old banishment, but anyway, let's get back to the cavalry combat, which is what we care about over here. So yeah, the demis, I mean, they're about the same size as regular cavalry, so they can't actually get surrounded much easier, especially by, like, chaff infantry, or lower tier infantry, or whatever, high model count infantry. And they'll just trade, especially the halberds, so inefficiently, because they really, honestly, don't have good attack and defense stats. Even the Royal Altdorfgryphites, which are an insanely expensive unit, 41 attack, 38 defense for something that's, what, 1850? I mean, that's really, really not great, especially when you consider at only 38 melee defense, like, a lot of units, even basic infantry with their charge bonus, will be getting, above base hit chance against you, which just really, really feels bad, right? But we're going to move them back into a defensive position here. I've definitely blundered my Pistoliers, and yeah, they got eaten by all the Dire Pack and Black Knights. So great job at Red Wedding Planner there, even though he's taking horrendous losses in the infantry battle. I mean, that's, kind of the MO of vampire counts in general, I would say. And quickly we'll just highlight here again, Volkmar exists, Cairn race. I've seen them work well against the Empire occasionally if they choose not to bring Volkmar, but Volkmar is pretty common in this matchup and very dangerous. But here, this is exactly the problem that Demigryph Knights and in general that lower model count cavalry is going to face, even against, not even infantry, just getting surrounded by dogs and enemy heavy cavalry. That model count difference, right? Just their low model count means they get teamed up on individually. Like, if we have a look here at a given model, like, this model right here, he's got this Empire troop fighting. The Empire troop's going to go down, so he's going to have to face, like, several zombies in a surround, possibly a Hound and a Black Knight, kind of all at the same time, right? So there's just a lot going on there for them to have to deal with. Mournfangs are probably one of the at 9 unit models, they have the least models of any cavalry unit in the game. And I think, I want to say Indie Pride's recording was, the test he did was them versus Red Crest, which is literally like one of the most like one-sided tests I can think of, mostly because they have 9 unit models versus 90 unit models of Red Crest. And their defensive stats are not very good, right? And so they're easily going to get surrounded by the Red Crest and destroyed, just like here. The Demigryph Knights, Royal Altarprophytes getting surrounded by all sorts of stuff and getting seen off finally by my own banishment, but that's fine. Overall, battle seems to be going pretty well, although, you know, with the Vampire Lord still on the field, Von Karstein Lord even, he's still a powerhouse. We've still got both White Kings quite healthy as well. I mean, there's definitely danger from Red Wedding Planner here. Rose Can Race going to eat that Burning Head, but, I mean, the Demigryph Knights, although they have got great value here, if we take a look, they're just so tattered at this point. I don't have a way to heal them. And, yeah, I mean, 91 kills here. Ooh, that charge right there just netted them like 300 value alone, almost. Charging into the very expensive Vampire Lord here. So they are going to get a little bit of additional value here in the late game as they kind of support Volkmar in this engagement, but they're really not going to probably be lasting very long. And these Black Knights are still operational. You know, helping to take out the Karstein Lord is pretty important, because once the demis are gone, I actually, other than drowning him in a sea of halberds, which I'm, you know, keeping these halberds in tactical reserve, you know, other than drowning him in a sea of halberds, I really don't have great tools for dealing with him, which, I mean, granted, there is something to be said for the sea of halberds. But anyway, nice little flock of doom there, going to deal some damage to said halberds. Just that tasteful little bit. And the demis, where are the demis? Well, they're done. They're shattered. They got rear charge there, as you probably saw. They're completely off the field. Although they did, again, get some pretty good value there. The Warrior Priest also just going to get straight up murdered by... Oh man, by the Von Karstein Lord here, the last of the Pistoliers running to the hills as well. So, you know, these White Kings, they just won't go away. This one here is crumbling. He's got about 8 seconds left to live. Yeah, it's still going to do some significant damage to the Bright Wizard in the meantime there. This other one's just getting slowly ground down by halberds, which is going to take quite a long time. And here, you know, realize I should probably actually get some of my spears into combat, try and finish off these Black Knights if we can. Undeath Resurgent on them, up to 46 melee defense, 110 armor. Spears won't do much. The halberds will definitely do more. But credit to Red Wedding Planner keeping them alive against, you know, Demigryph Knights with halberds. And that's kind of the thing, right? Like, they didn't actually fulfill their tactical role of getting rid of all the large armored units my opponent brought here. So that's fine. Volkmar and the Von Karstein Lord are going to duke it out. And although the balance of power looks heavily in my favor right now, I mean, I do expect Volkmar to win this fight, and then he kind of doesn't, which, you know, in hindsight, definitely makes sense. Von Karstein Lord has much better attack and defense stats. Like, oh, whoops, I guess I probably should have supported Volkmar. Oh, well, I'll probably be fine, right? It's not like he'll goon my Bright Wizard, which he immediately does, of course. A nice pocket late-game zombie summon, very well conserved from Red Wedding Planner, used at a pretty opportune moment. The placement is all right. I think maybe placing it on these fleeing spears, if you could have got him there, would have been nice, or even on top of these very tattered unbreakable units. But regardless, I mean, that Bright Wizard's done for, and suddenly the balance of power is back towards even, especially with that zombie summon still going. I mean, I basically only have this one tactical reserve halberd left, so I'm actually kind of glad I kept them in tactical reserve, which definitely didn't forget about them. Yeah. Because they're going to come in very handy in this late game here. We'll fast forward as the grind ensues. White King actually does survive those halberds finally, you know, after literally like 5 minutes of fighting. Together, they clean up some more of the infantry there, kind of single entity hammer and anvil, if you will. But here, I think Red Wedding Planner, you know, as he is my patron, I will just say, if you had had the Karstein Lord to rear charge the halberdiers at this exact moment, or, you know, a little bit sooner, perhaps, maybe you could have actually got a leadership break on them, which definitely would have won you the game there. But I'm not 100% sure you would, given how healthy the halberdiers are, and, I mean, after you get your charge bonus with the Karstein Lord, they are going to start to deal damage with him, to him rather, pretty significantly. So, I don't know if you'd be able to get a leadership break in time. But regardless, it's going to end up being a lot closer than I initially thought it would be. credit to Red Wedding Planner for not going quietly into that good knight. Very fun battle, super close there at the end. And the Demigryph Knights, like I said, really good value. 2,300 at the end of the day with that little bit of extra there on the Lord at the end. And even still, you know, he ended up surviving to then go on to finish Volkmar. They themselves got rear charged and finished off by Black Knights, which, funny enough, didn't actually pay for themselves, but I think the tactical usage of them here sort of dictated that they were going to face tough engagements. I do think they were used correctly. I mean, ultimately, the Cairn race, as far as like a build perspective goes, I think we're the biggest kind of weak point here. Red Wedding Planner and I were kind of discussing this after the battle as well, obviously, in the practice session. I was saying that, you know, a couple of corpse cards would really augment this build pretty well. Like, I honestly think you cut the Cairn race maybe for more Black Knights, maybe just, you know, a couple of corpse cards. Maybe you get some zombies in the front line as well just to give you more meat. Yeah, the Unholy Lodestone certainly would have been helpful to give some extra stats and healing. Basically always helpful for vampire counts, but anyway. Yeah, a low model count cavalry. So, Demigryph Knights, because they're the smallest, I mean, even though they have 24 unit models, which is more than some others, they still struggle with this pretty significantly. So you have to be so precise about how you use them, and really have to be very careful about them getting bogged down in any kind of chaff. The Lance version, at the very least, 60 charge. If you do have to charge into some chaff, they're going to do more damage. It'll be more of an efficient trade. They have slightly more melee defense as well. Baseline 6 melee defense. Actually pretty significant. So, you know, that's something to be aware of. Other monstrous cavalry, I mean, you could kind of consider Dragon Ogres in a way. I mean, they have 12 models. They say monstrous infantry. I guess monstrous beast now. That's actually more appropriate. I mean, they have many similarities to monstrous infantry, but in usage, they're more like low model count cavalry, and they do suffer from some similar issues, although, again, because their models are a little bit bigger, not going to get surrounded quite as easily. But, like, Demigryph Knights, I would say, in terms of the surround problem, like, besides Mournfangs, probably have it the worst of any monstrous cavalry. Necropolis Knights are pretty thick, they're pretty wide, so you can kind of get away with using them, and they won't, you know, get surrounded as easily. Same thing with Stag Knights. They're going to be, you know, obviously much faster as well. Granted, they're pretty squishy, but, you know, you can use them effectively if you have good micro. I haven't talked a lot about Lizardmen Cavalry in this series. They sort of fall into this monstrous cavalry category in that they have less unit models than a traditional cavalry unit, which hurts them because the thing is, like, because you're going to be taking all these extra hits, right? And if more units are getting surrounded, you're taking even more hits, and it kind of starts to cascade. So, at least in my experience, I've found that the lower model, like, having less models in terms of your cavalry, it makes them struggle more and more, generally. So, I mean, obviously, yeah, Mournfangs, not that you'd see them in multiplayer, but 9 unit models, only 32 melee defense, they are going to have a really bad time against most chaff infantry. As you guys may know from your campaigns, they take damage very, very easily. Anyway, what do you guys think, though, about Monstrous Cavalry? I know I've seen a few good replays of Demis recently, but personally, as an Empire main, like, I don't use them much myself these days. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.